We are back with our Week 10 episode of Choo Choo and the Doctor. Of course, as always, I am Paul Fanson, otherwise known as Dr. Green and White, and I am joined, as I usually am, by Michigan State radio color commentator and former Spartan running back, J.O. Colcrick. How are you this evening, J.U.?
I am good. How are you?
Good. I am doing well, as I say, other than a couple disappointing consecutive weeks of Spartan football. It's been a nice fall, had a good Halloween. Um, but yeah, it's not been great on the gridiron, and of course we weren't able to make our schedules connect last week, so we actually have two different games that we can talk about that I think were both winnable, but the Spartans kind of let slip through their fingers. So, of course, 2 weeks ago, I think everybody that would be watching or listening to this would remember the loss to the bitter rival Michigan Wolverines. It was a pretty close game in the first half, and then it kind of got a little bit away from them in the second half. And I think Michigan's run game, which we knew was going to be an issue, just became a little bit too much for the defense to handle, especially with the offense giving us little support as they unfortunately did. So, Gio, what were your initial takeaways from the loss of the Wolverines this year?
Yeah, I thought, going back to, out of the last 48 games, the team that won the football game has been the team that controlled the football on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The run game has been, the leading team that, won that. With Michigan, this rushing for over 275 yards. That was tough. The Spartans were able to eclipse 100 yards. In rushing, I believe they were at 115 or something in that area in the ground game there. But the big thing is the offense was not clicking in the first half. They couldn't get a rhythm going in the first half, and they put the defense in very peculiar situations. On the first drive that the Spartans got the ball was going, and there was a fumble by Aiden Childs at the 30-yard line. The defense did a tremendous job of holding Michigan to only a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an answer, and then going into the half it was 10-7 at that point. But in the second half, once again, I think it just took a toll on the defense being out there so much and so often, because the offense could not sustain drives and get points on the board. That really hurt. And when you have a tired defense, usually you tend to that's when you get to see those big running lanes, because guys try to do too much and
Mm-hmm.
try to make a play as opposed to just doing what they're supposed to do individually. They try to take it into their own hands, and that's when you see people jumping out of their lane assignments and not getting lined up the proper way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know coming into the game, I thought the biggest key was Michigan State's run defense had to stop the explosive play. And I think by and large, they did that until really the last 4 minutes, which I'd say at that point, the dam just kind of broke. But I thought it was a pretty admirable effort up until that point. And then, of course, we had Micaiah Frazier, who I
Yeah,
think had one of his best games as a Spartan on the ground. He had 109 yards on 14 carries, and he looked like he was competing out there, and that was good to see.
yeah, absolutely. He's a guy that he had a couple. He gave him some sparks. Had a couple big runs.
Mm-hmm.
The 49-yard run that he had down the sideline on their sideline there to create a spark. And so those are some big things that you know good pluses that you could take out the game for the Spartans on the side of it. But at the end of the day, it's that win and loss that really matters. And the Spartans could not pull it off. It was a little too late, because once again, I think the defense was just out on the field too much.
Yeah. Now, I think the other thing I thought, or rather expected, and I thought would be a big reason if Michigan State were to have won the game, I thought that there was a pretty solid chance that Aiden Childs would be able to kind of outduel Bryce Underwood at the quarterback position. But quite frankly, neither quarterback really had that good of a game. And, of course, Childs had that fumble on the first, really the third play of the game from scrimmage, and it kind of went downhill from there. He really never did find a solid rhythm. Do you think that was just kind of getting off to a bad start, or was it more something the Michigan defense was doing to confuse him, perhaps?
I just think it was getting off to a bad start. Couldn't get a good rhythm, and I think there's a lot of pressure on it, and especially from external pressure. saying get the ball to this guy, get the ball to this guy, all the time when that's being pushed out there and you get under center, you try to figure out ways and sometimes you start forcing things. But schematically, you need to start if a quarterback's struggling like that a little bit, start doing different things, get the ball out of his hand quicker, give him high percentage throws, swing passes, now passes, tunnel screens, all those different types of to just get the ball in the hands of a playmaker. And I think early in the game we didn't, go that route. And we started to a little bit in the second half, but we didn't, approach the game that way from an offensive scheme side of things.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Now, I think the other kind of, or one of the many curious things about that game was, we mentioned how it was 10-7 at halftime, but then Michigan came out in the second half, scored a touchdown. And it looked like things were starting to get away. But then the Spartan offense did show some spark, and they started to maybe make a bit of what looked like could be a comeback. They were able to score a touchdown, and then they were down 11 points, and there was that decision to go for two. Which, I mean, there's a lot of I was very angry about that when I saw that in real time. I've heard some analysis about that as far as like analytics and when you go for it, when you're not. What was your take on that decision? Did you think that was the right call, or would you prefer just to take the extra point there?
While I was in there, and if you listen to the broadcast, I said, after they scored the touchdown, I said I think they should go for two.
Oh, okay.
That was what that's what I yeah. So I was in favor of them, going for two, getting those extra points, getting that momentum, and then cutting the score to what it is, and then turning it to that type of game there. You're down 11, you go for two. I was for that. So that's and they went for it. I understand it. Like you say, analytics say that's the call. And we've seen the Coach Smith. They're aggressive on offense with the play calling, in the situational stuff like going for on fourth downs and those things of that nature. So going with that, it's staying within their DNA. That's why I didn't have an issue with going for the two.
Okay. All right. That's good to hear. That's, yeah, as I say, when I was up in the stands and I did have a chance, we made kind of a game time decision. My wife had actually never experienced a real Big Ten tailgate, so it was kind of a fun experience for her. But, we made that decision to go. And when I was sitting up there in the stands, I was just like, yeah, I'm more in favor of taking the 1 point there. Because then, of course, in the next possession, they had a chance where if they would have kicked a field goal, if they were, you could have cut it to 7 or 8. Still, they were aggressive, which I get, but maybe it's just the ongoing theme of this team is like when they have some of those, kind of critical plays, they're not getting enough of them.
Yeah, and I also think too, you got to go back to, with that going forward, stealing the momentum. One, and don't get me wrong, like I'm not trying to make any excuses whatsoever. The Spartans lost. That's it. But for being a home game, your home crowd, usually you tend to get a little bit of calls here and there from the officials, and the Spartans were not able to get that. So I understand trying to combat all those things that you're playing against, to just spark your team, get your team going. And the officiating in that game was absolutely horrible. You have that, I might be jumping, you might be going to it, but you have that offsides call that
Yep.
they called, and perfectly timed perfectly timed play, jumped the snap right at the same moment, got a fumble, recovered the fumble, took it to the 50-yard line, got that momentum. All right, it gets called back after talking about it. It gets called back. Then 3 plays later, your star linebacker gets hurt.
Yep.
So all those different things, and then to add on top of it is, the coaches have the opportunity to send plays into the Big Ten, afterwards. Talking to Coach Jonathan Smith and say, hey, what did they say? He came back. They came back with an apology saying they missed it, and
Oh wow.
the official anticipated the false start. You can't anticipate the false start. It's your job. So at the end of the day, all you get is a my bad. I'm sorry. So far this season, there's been a lot of those my bad from the Big Ten officials when it comes to officiating Michigan State games. So they've got a lot of calls. You go back to the USC game, the targeting call against Jordan Hall. They
Hmm.
review it and said, no, maybe it shouldn't have been a targeting call. So all those things. So that's that's what it is.
Wow, I didn't know that was the response from the Big Ten office on that play. And as you mentioned, the officiating in that game was quite the thing to see. I mean, 12 penalties for 105 yards, and
Right.
some of those were earned, but like there
Yeah.
was a, there was an awful lot of calls that weren't made though too. I mean, it seemed like every time the Spartans had a pass on third down, there was heavy contact on the receiver that wasn't called.
Right. That was the one, early in the game. The pass, it was clear, blatant pass interference on Nick Marsh. He tackled him before the ball got
Yeah.
there, and no call on that. That was a crucial, third down. So you talk about it. Yeah, the Spartans, earned some of the personal fouls that they got. Those were, personal foul penalties that they got. But some other ones in key moments was definitely didn't have the feeling of you're playing at home.
Yeah. Well, and the other frustrating thing that may have been angrily yelling about in the stands 2 weeks ago was there was a couple plays I thought were pretty close in the first half. Like first there was the fumble out of bounds. Did the Michigan player really recover it? Frankly, in the stands you don't get a great look at that replay, so it's hard to say. And then there was another crucial third down pass, I think, to Amari Kelly on the sideline. Would look like it was called out of bounds, but was he really out of bounds? And I believe the coaching staff actually took a delay of game penalty because they expected it to be reviewed,
Right.
and, and they didn't review it. But if Nick Marsh may have stepped out of bounds at the half-yard line, we definitely need to take a look at that. Like that's the play we need to look at. Of all the other
Yeah.
plays, no, but let's look at that one and make sure that one was right. That was
Exactly.
that was infuriating. and and let's all be honest. When you have two teams on the field, one of which may have just come off a very lengthy NCAA investigation for breaking the rules, multiple coaches with show cause. Why would that team get the benefit of the doubt? I just don't understand. So I'll just leave that maybe at that for now. Okay, well maybe that's enough talk about those folks down the road with bad taste and color schemes and everything else. So let's talk about the game most recently. The Spartans attempted to lick their wounds, took the show on the road to the great city of Minneapolis. Honestly, if you just look at the box score, you'd think this was a game that the Spartans won by maybe one or two touchdowns.
Hmm.
Really dominated in every phase of the game. We had the surprise start from Alessio Vasilovic at the quarterback position. I think he was solid. But at the end of the day, it wasn't quite enough, and the Spartans fall in overtime. So, again, I guess I'll let you start with your initial impressions for the game at Minnesota.
Yeah. The game. You look at Minnesota's schedule. You look at their win losses. There were 5-3 going into that game. All three losses that they had was on the road. All five
Mm-hmm.
wins that they had was at home. So it's tough to win at home. And again, before the game, I'm on the sidelines and teams warming up, and I'm talking to head coach Jonathan Smith, getting his thoughts and everything on the game. And he talked about, hey, listen, this team isn't more talented than we are. You know, they're successful at home, but because they find ways to win games at home.
Mm-hmm.
And this season so far, he said, like, we found ways to lose games, so, and that's a fair assessment.
Yep.
If so, um, that's again, Minnesota found a way with some help again by the officials. We'll get into that
We'll get to
again
that. Yep.
with some help. They found a way to get the win. But you talk about it, looking at the box scores. This is a thing that if you just look at it, didn't put the score up, you'll say, hey, the team that had over 400 something yards, 467 yards of total offense won that game compared to the team that had 300 yards of total offense. The team that threw the ball for 311 yards, won. The team that ran for 156 yards, won the football game. So that's what you would say, but unfortunately, that was not the case. The Spartans, when they had the opportunity to stamp it and win it, and it's just a microcosm of this season. Missing the field goal, missing two field goals.
Yeah.
That's something that's just absolutely brutal, and it was not far field goals either.
No, definitely makeable ones, and ones that Connington has shown that he can make in the past. I mean, he's been pretty reliable all season, and so to have him miss two was tough. But yeah, and I did want to return to the quarterback situation. Of course, we had heard rumors that Childs and Milicevic had split reps all week. I thought we were under the impression that they would split time, but as it turns out, Childs only took one snap, and it was a meaningless snap before halftime. Do you think that the coaches just they liked what they saw out of Milicevic and just decided to ride that hot hand, or was it more planned that he would wind up taking the majority of the snaps?
No, it was planned he was going to take the majority of the snaps.
Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely planned he was going to take the majority of the snaps, and so throughout the week, from talking to coaches, I got an idea, and I knew who was going to be the guy to line up behind center that game, and also too, again, back to pregame conversations with Coach Smith, and he talked about the reason why Alessio was started, is to, create a
Mhm.
spark for the team. And he said it's just not a spark in the quarterback position, because they need a spark throughout the entire team. Because
Mhm.
if you're on a 5-6 game losing streak at the time, you need some type of. It's not just one position. That's
Mhm.
the issue. So, but the most visible position in football is the quarterback position. So they want to figure out a way to get a spark that way, and they thought, giving Alessio the opportunity to get the start and see what he can do. Hopefully, will create a spark. And also, too, on the other side, Aiden Childs handled it like an absolute pro.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't care what anyone else is saying or seeing that they saw. Of course, when something like this happened, you're going to see all this. I saw him on the sideline. He was looking with his head down, or I saw this, I saw that. That's not the case. He was an absolute pro about it
Mhm.
throughout the entire week of practice. Um, he was an absolute pro. He cheered Alessio on. They both cheered each other on as they went in. They did split reps,
Mhm.
throughout the beginning of the week. And going into, even while we were in Minnesota, I had an opportunity to sit down and talk to Aiden for 10 minutes. And,
Mhm.
he was an absolute, hey, who he wants what's best for the team. He wants what's best for the pro. He just wants to win. Yeah,
Mhm.
he's pissed off and upset that he's not starting. If he wasn't, I would question him.
Yeah.
I would question his competitiveness. So spoke to him, had a beverage with his family, as well. They were, all, very pros about it and everything. So that is one thing that I want to try to dispel, while I have this platform here, that
Mhm.
there isn't any animosity or anything like that on Aiden Child's side. Yes, he wants to be the starting quarterback at Michigan State, but he understands, what the process is. He trusts the coaching staff and
Mhm.
everything of that nature. So, yeah, so he was an absolute pro about it, and they wanted that spark, and they got that spark.
Yeah.
Alessio, he went in. The first half, I was like, golly, this poor kid.
Yeah.
6 sacks in the first half. Um, and but he stood there. He stood there. He made some big time throws. He stood in the pocket, knowing when the hit was coming, staring down the proverbial gun barrel, and making the throw, taking the hits, being on the move a little bit, and he was able to have a very impressive game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was 20 for 28. That's 71% completion rate. As you said, 311 yards. He really played a great game. And, you'd mentioned the six first half sacks. I mean, that was really the only problem. I mean, that was clearly the problem with the offense in the first half and why they
Yes.
had no points. I mean, they couldn't string together maybe more than 3 or 4 pass plays without him getting killed in the backfield.
Right.
But and this coaching staff has been criticized for potentially not being very good at making second half adjustments. But there was only 1 sack in that second half.
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly something got better.
Yeah, if you're going to criticize, you got to give credit when credit's due.
That's right.
And I feel they made a really nice adjustment. What I saw in the second half, they turned to some sprint out protection. When you're doing that sprint out protection, you're getting to the perimeter more. You're getting getting away from the defensive line. You have the offensive line sliding with you in that protection, and what that can do as well in the back end of things. And you saw that in that touchdown pass to Rodney Bullard is that was a sprint out protection there. The secondary got crossed up. He made the catch, and the guys went like that, and he was
Yep.
able to sprint down for the big what was that 71 yards or something like that,
Something like
70
that.
yards. Yeah, so he was able to get that big touchdown, but so those are some of the adjustments that they did to put them on the move a little bit. And also, too, what happened in that second half is they picked up the run game. The run game started to have
Yep.
success. And then when you have success with the run game, what it did with that Minnesota defense is put them on their heels. And then you could do the play action and get your tight ends involved. And they did that. And those were the things that they adjusted to in the second half, and they were able to put points on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 17 unanswered points, and I mean, and of course, the defense really did play quite well. The vast majority of that game, I think they forced like 7 punts. You could say forced a missed field goal, but anyway, they had one drive that ended in a missed field goal. And so, that was, really quite encouraging as well. It was just, again, as you mentioned, some of those missed opportunities, whether, the 2 missed field goals, missed tackle here or there. And then, there was that 1 fourth down play where the ball just got tipped by the defender. And if that doesn't get tipped, that could have potentially gone for 6.
Right.
So, you change any one of about 10 plays in that game and the Spartans win in regulation. So that's just the way it goes sometimes. But of course, the game did wind up going to overtime. And that, again, unfortunately, forces us to talk again about officiating. Because there were, probably 3 controversial plays right in a row in that overtime period, and none of them went the Spartans' way. And
Right.
that the strangest one, of course, was the first one, which is that, that pass interference call. I was in real time. I was not overly convinced it was pass interference, and I'm less concerned about that as the situation around it, where they called it and then they set the ball, and it was almost like it was done. The next play is starting, and then they wave it off. And I don't think I've ever seen a play waved off that late on a non-reviewable call before. That was weird.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And traditionally, what will happen is if they throw the flag, the refs would get together and say, "Hey, one come back. Maybe I didn't see that. I saw that," and they'll be like, "Hey, after further discussion, there's no penalty on the play." But that was not the case.
No.
They threw the flag. He communicated to the official what the penalty was, pass interference on the defense. They called it. They set the ball. Then the opposing coach had a meltdown, and then the guy that was getting the earful ran in and said, "Oh no, it's not it." So they said, an official came in with a strong opinion that it wasn't, but the guy that threw the flag, knew that. So that's one of the things. It's like it's very frustrating, for the players, who are out there, battling it out for it to be, decided in that type of fashion. If you win the game, great, you won the game. But if you lose the game, you think about, not only the stumbles you had, execution wise, but also what could have been. Did something get taken away from you as well? And I truly felt that play was taken away from the Spartans.
Yeah. And then, of course, just to add insult to injury, on Minnesota's ensuing drive, and I believe it was a very similar situation. I think it might have been on 3rd down, but I could be wrong on that. Again, a throw into the end zone, flag comes out, pass interference, which frankly, a lot less contact than we saw the week before against the Wolverines, just let's be
Right.
honest. And And another thing, like I've always been of the opinion that when you get into late game situations, whether it's basketball or football or any other sport, you got to have a little bit of discretion of whether blowing the whistle. Now, I know the theory of like a foul's a foul, whether it's in the first minute or last minute. That looks good on paper. I frankly just don't believe that or subscribe to it. You got to let the kids play and decide the game. And unless it's really obvious, you got to swallow the whistle there. So that was frustrating. I don't know your take on that, but
No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is frustrating. But then, also too, you go back to the fact that it's again, it's just one of those. You talk about, you have a good fall, except for, the Spartans on the gridiron. That's what's, killing your fall. And it's the same thing as, they get themselves in these great positions. You're up and you kick the ball out of bounds. You give it on the 35, and then the very next play, it's a 15-yard personal foul. There's
yep.
enough, so those things too, compile, you talk about, take it out of the ref's hands. Those are some things that, didn't give you an opportunity to take it out of the ref's hands. And,
Yeah.
you talk about playing a complete game. I thought this game, the Spartans played well on offense to win this
Yes.
game. They played well on defense to win this game. But special teams was the bugaboo. It was one
Yeah.
that was not, good for them on, to win this game. I think if they would have had, you know, play, 10%, better on special teams,
Yeah.
have that opportunity to win the game.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was the final play of the game, the scramble from Minnesota's quarterback, and I think it was Darius Snow almost caught him in the backfield that would have extended the game. Of course, he goes to the corner of the end zone, and they have yet another controversial call. Was he or was he not out of bounds? I got to be honest. And of course, on the broadcast, the referee was standing right in the way of where you couldn't actually see whether he's where the ball was when he stepped out of bounds. Again, the Spartans keep rolling snake eyes for reasons I don't understand. But I'd heard later the commentators on like Big Ten Network saying that they had synced up the video and they were able to figure out when he stepped out. I don't know if you heard any more about that play or not, but it was just the cherry on top, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard that this thing, and he did step out before the ball crossed.
Oh,
That's
jeez.
the vantage points and the videos that I saw, and so that's But we'll find out again. They're obviously going to send those tapes to the Big Ten. They're going to send the pass interference. They're going to send both pass interference. They're going to get an explanation on why you can call it, set the ball, and then when the team breaks the huddle, then stop the play and say, no, you can't, upon further discussion. So they'll get those things. And once again, it's going to come back as, oh, my bad. But at the end of the day, they don't realize that people's livelihoods are on the line.
Yeah.
And, they're making these things with no consequences on their end.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing that makes me feel less bad about that final play is, let's say they did rule him short. It's 4th and an inch. Does PJ Fleck kick the field goal? I doubt it. He probably goes for the tush push, and they're probably going to get it. So, I think the chance to win there was to catch him in the backfield when he had the opportunity, not let him get
But
that
the
close.
thing too is like, but it's so like you talk about, let the players play it,
Yeah.
let that decide it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so looking ahead, there's 3 games left. The Spartans are sitting at 3-6. That means if they want to join the postseason and make a bowl game for the first time since 2021, they are going to need to win each of the next 3 games. So we got home game again versus Penn State in 2 weeks after the bye, the road game at Iowa, and then the finale at Ford Field against Maryland. So what do you think, Jo? Can they pull the rabbit out of the hat? Can they throw the luck around? Can they get those last 3 wins? Let's
The big thing, that's why this Minnesota game was so important, that you didn't have to have that strain and that pressure on you for 3 in a row.
mhm.
That's why that was so important, because you win that game. You have a Penn State team that's hurting, trying to find an identity. You could pull one off at home. Iowa's a tall task. Playing at Kinnick Stadium is a
Yeah,
very tough place to play. And then the Maryland game, and you don't have to worry about the elements. It's inside. You get the extra buzz. You're playing in a pro stadium. You could pull that, but it's gonna be a tall order for the Spartans. But the thing that I like is, the locker room is still bought in. Those kids are still bought into to the coaching staff. They're still bought into the mission and the goals that they have. So, just line up and play football. But it's definitely a tough task that's ahead of them.
yeah. There are a few things that do give me some hope. I mean, one of which is that Penn State's got blown out by Ohio State. Next week they get to invite the Indiana Hoosiers um, into Happy Valley, and I think it's going to be a very unhappy afternoon for the Nittany Lions again. And so they'll be at 6 losses too. And I think that could be who knows the emotional state of that locker room and that team. They've gone through almost as probably more than the Spartans have this year because they had much higher expectations. So,
But that's
you think that's
careful.
dangerous? Yeah.
That's my upset of the week.
Oh, Penn State over Indiana.
Yes, that's my
Oh,
upset of the week.
okay. I love it. I love the upset pick of the week. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I think that might be closer than people think. That's a good one. Okay. Okay. Let's keep an eye on that. Um, but I do agree that game at Iowa, ooh, that's a tall, tall task. And Iowa's
Yeah.
been playing well lately. Um,
Mhm.
my comment that I will make there is that I believe Iowa has, I think it's back-to-back games. I think they might have to play Oregon this week, if I remember right. They threw one of the West Coast teams, and then I think they have a road trip. I think to USC. I really hope I'm right on that. But they will have they're going to be coming back from the West Coast, but
Right.
right before they play Michigan State, and then they get Nebraska the week after. So it's kind of a trap game, potentially with a little jet lag thrown in.
Right.
Maybe that's my that's my positive spin on that. And then if you can get those two, well, then the Maryland game will be about a toss-up.
Right.
Especially if the Spartans get two wins, they'll that game should be the Michigan State might actually come into that game favored, and it's
Did Maryland
semi
fire
home.
Lockley, or did I just?
I think that was
It was.
that was a bad tweet came from like a burner account or something, and I think that has
Okay.
not been confirmed. But that was weird. Yeah, I don't think that's true, but I'm not even 100% sure. In this modern age, where you can't,
Right.
it's really hard to say. But I don't think that's true. Um, I mean, maybe by then he will be. I don't know,
I
but
saw it, and then I went to ESPN, but I didn't see anything on ESPN, so that's what I figured. It wasn't a real, but
yeah,
you
I
never
think
know.
yeah, I think that's fake. I mean, um, there's a lot of really ridiculous stuff that comes across the feed of that are sports related that is clearly AI generated nonsense from like someone in Eastern Europe or something. But uh,
Right.
that one was a little harder to figure out. So I think that one is crazy. But and then well, I have two questions left for you. One is that, of course, as we all know, Coach Smith has been under a little bit of fire. The seat may be a little bit hot. But do you think that Coach Smith can turn this around, either this year or potentially next year if he's given that opportunity?
Do I think he can turn it around? Yes. Yes, I do. I think there's going to have to be some changes, made on the staff. But yes, I think given opportunity to turn it around, given resources,
Hmm.
um, I think that's a big one. Right now, we're a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. All right, and people say,
It's good.
like, and no offense to the guys that are on this team, no offense to the guys that were brought in from the transfer portal and everything. People are like, oh, you get a guy from, let's say Missoula, Montana State or something like that. Like Michigan State, like they're like, do you think we want to shop at Missoula, Montana State, or do you think we want to shop, at Ohio State, Alabama, those different places?
Hmm.
Like you shop with the means that you have,
Yeah.
and right now, that's a big focus and a big issue. So I think given the proper resources, um, Coach can, turn this around, because the thing that he's doing is he's building a good foundation. People might not see it, and people are going to give me so much crap for this one to come out. They're going to be tweeting, Xing, whatever they want to call it, these days. I mean, and I'm fine with it. And if anyone want to sit and have an intelligent football X's and O conversation about building and changing, we'll open up this platform. They can come on here and we can go back and forth and have that. But he's building a good culture.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important things. And when D'Antonio came in, that was his big thing that he wanted to do. He wanted to build a foundation. Yes, I get it. Right now, the wins and losses aren't there, but the people are there. So these players love him. They love this coaching staff. They absolutely love Coach Smith. They'll go to war for Coach. So but he needs the resources um, that other schools have
Yeah.
in order to, compete. If we want to compete, we got to get the resources because it comes down to right now we don't have 22 dudes that can outdude
Mm,
Penn State, Ohio State for 4 quarters.
yeah.
We do for a quarter, 2 quarters, everything like that, but we don't have 22 dudes that can go out there and do it.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right, J. Will, I have the last and potentially most important question, which of course returns to our reoccurring theme on this show, which is the ranking of the media meals at the different away stadiums. So, in review, we currently have in first place Indiana, which served meatloaf and mac and cheese at 7.4. We have Nebraska Media in second place, serving chicken tacos and red hot dogs, 6.4. You have Michigan State's media at 6.2, brats, dogs, pulled pork. I don't know if you included the Melting Moments ice cream sandwich in your calculation, but just, that's important.
I'm not just I
Oh,
know this a cold take, hot take, whatever. I'm not a
oh,
big fan of the melting Mullins ice
oh
cream.
my. Oh my, J.U.
if
Okay.
they this is how I'll be a fan. If they had those same exact cookies without the chocolate in it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like the
Okay.
same texture of the cookies, the same
Yeah.
exact like color and flavor, but no chocolate chips in it and the vanilla
Oh,
ice cream, I'll be all in.
man, I think we need to talk to the Melting Moment folks about this. They could have it.
Yeah,
There's probably a marketing opportunity for like
yes.
I don't even know what we would call it, but we can come up with an amazing name for it. And then, of course, in last place currently, the Trojans of Southern California, only a 5.6. Beef and rice, you were not impressed. So, Minnesota, how did Minnesota treat you? What did they feed you? How was it? What do you score do you give them?
Yeah, so I was excited going to Minnesota, a school that I think is a blue collar area. Minnesota.
Yeah.
All those things. Friday night we get in town, we go to a great steakhouse, one of Manny's
Mm.
Steakhouse, one of the oldest steakhouses there. Had a beautiful meal. Caught up with some former teammates. Great. Went to the game, and I was excited for it because I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a blue collar working man's, food." And they had it was burgers, dogs, mac and cheese, but I wasn't feeling it.
Mm.
So I will give that an even 6.
6.0. Okay, so
Yeah.
that puts them ahead of USC, still below Michigan State. I think that's a fair grade. Okay. Well, it's good to know. I'll have to do like a official bar graph that we can post on Twitter once we're done with the rest of the season. But well, I think we can probably wrap it up there, JU. Again, I always appreciate the time that you give us and the opportunity to talk about Spartan football. It's a lot of fun for
Well,
me, and
what do you
hopefully,
bye week? What are you doing for the bye?
oh my goodness. Well, actually, I will be at the Michigan State Arkansas basketball game next Saturday night.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
I went through, and my schedule allows me to attend that. I do try to cover a handful of basketball games here or there. I actually am just a little bit more of a basketball guy than a football guy. I love all my Spartan sports, but basketball has always been my
Are you going
favorite.
to do that double? Are you going to do hockey at 4, basketball at 7?
Oh, I didn't know that was an option.
Yeah, the Penn State comes to town. That's a big
Oh
game.
wow, that isn't. Oh my. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. This is you give me something to think about. We'll see what my wife thinks about that. But maybe I have covered hockey before, but not in a while. And when I was on camp, it was the late '90s, and that was when Izzo was first starting to get things rolling. And actually, I remember Saban being introduced as the head coach, but like the hockey program was by far the most
Yeah,
successful at that time.
and
So
it's getting
I've
back there now.
it's getting back there. I
Yes.
have fond memories of Mount Ice Arena
And if you're
back in
ever
the
in that
day.
club level there at the hockey at Munn, the food there, they have a nice little buffet there. The food's really
Ah,
good there.
nice.
So
I don't know if I'll get up there, but I'll have to keep it. Maybe I can sneak up the stairwell or something. You never know.
yeah.
Sometimes that media pass gets you weird places if they don't notice sticking up. All right, JU. Well, I appreciate your time. I hope you have a good rest of your evening. I guess next week's the bye. We'll see if we our schedules allow. I don't know if we can chat quickly next week. We'll see if it makes sense or not.
Yeah, we'll do it Monday. I'll be flying back
Okay.
to town Monday. Monday morning, I'll be back in town. Flying back.
Okay.
So
All right. I'll hit you up and we'll see if we can make it work. But All right, I
All right.
guess we'll just say goodnight to everybody. As always, we say go green.
Go White.
All right, thanks, Gio. See you next week.
See ya.